We do that just before we hear item 8. Did everyone online hear me? Should I do that again?
Yeah, do it again.
Okay, so we'll start again. This is the Angus Council Communities Committee on the 23rd of May 2023 at 2 o'clock. Members, we've received a deputation request from Mr Arthur Grant, who wishes to address the meeting in relation to item 8, parking enforcement. Mr Grant has indicated that his deputation is in relation to detail rather than principle of the proposal. Do we agree to hear the deputation prior to the item? Okay, we move on to apologies and substitutions.
Convener, sorry, just before we move on, could I ask those at home to mute their microphones because there's an echo? Thank you. Sorry, Convener. Apologies from Councillors Devine, Melville and Proctor, with Councillors Durno, Beattie and Gall substituting.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest and statements of transparency for the meeting? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just really transparency. It's item 6, cycling, walking and safer routes. I kind of initiated one of those, the hillside to America route, and spent some time with, I think, an officer walking the route so that he knew what was involved. So just a statement of transparency. I don't think it's anything untoward, but just to be clear about that. I'll maybe say something about it when we come to that item.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, mine's a statement of transparency as well. It's item 7, the experimental traffic regulation order. I did attend a stakeholder meeting for Muirfield School, but I will be taking part in any discussion or voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Okay, Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, the same as Councillor Fairweather. I attended the stakeholder meeting for Mason Dew Primary School.
And Councillor Cowdery.
Yeah, on that theme, I also attended the stakeholder meeting for Muirfield Primary School along with Councillor Fairweather.
And Councillor Scott.
Same as Councillor Beattie, I attended for Mason Dew School.
And Councillor Meakin.
Attended for Newtail.
Councillor Nicholl.
Yes, also like Councillor Fairweather and Cowdery, I also was at the stakeholder meeting.
Thanks, everybody. We can move on to agenda item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting. Is that submitted for approval with the correct record of the 18th of April 23? Thank you. Councillor Speed has requested to speak on items 4 and 5 in terms of Standing Order 36. Members who are not members of the committee may request to speak, but it is a matter for the committee to determine. Do members agree to hear from Councillor Speed? Thank you. We move on then to agenda item 4, which is the Local Housing Strategy 23-28. Who is going to be leading this from the officer side?
I'm happy to do a brief introduction, and then Catherine Johnson's available, as well as Colin McGarver, to take any specific questions. The report is, as members will be aware, we're required to bring forward a local housing strategy every 5 years prior to submission to Scottish Government for approval and sign-off. Therefore, we're presenting this to members at this time and to agree the content of the local housing strategy.
Catherine Johnson, are you going to come in now?
I can come in on any specific questions that there are.
Okay, do members have any questions on this one? Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you very much, Convener. Page 18 of the Local Housing Strategy Report, one of the priorities that's been identified is reducing empty homes, and it's also said that we still see a significant number of empty homes. Can I ask Ms Johnson what the plan is to reduce? Because we do hear about voids quite regularly. I take it there's a plan in place to reduce these. Thank you.
Yes, of course, you can answer that question. The reference in the local housing strategy to the empty homes relates both to the council's own stock, but also to the private sector, where the majority of empty homes are. I realise that there is a focus on the empty homes which are within the council's own stock at the moment, and rightly so, because they are a wasted resource and we need to focus on getting those properties back into use as soon as possible. I'm sure members will all understand that there are a variety of reasons that the council's own properties are empty, and there's no one quick fix to bringing those properties back into use. But we are going to be focusing on the range of actions that we need to make that happen over the coming months. That's looking at repairs for these properties. It's looking at the issues that have been mentioned here before around meters and clearing debt off meters, and also looking at making sure that we're able to allocate these properties quickly as well. So there are a range of factors contributing to our own stock being empty for much longer than we would like it to.
Thank you, Catherine. Anyone else for questions in the chamber? Okay, we move to online. Councillor Fairweather.
Right. Thank you, Convener. I didn't know you were doing it in the chamber and then online. Convener, I seems to be very, doesn't seem to be a good line.
Try again, Councillor Fairweather. We can hear you okay in here.
Okay, it's just maybe me. That sounds better. Yeah, I welcome this report. But there are an awful lot of promises. Right through the report. In fact, too many for me to go through today. What I'd like to ask is, what will the officers be doing to make sure elected members and the public actually see delivery of these promises? i.e., are there going to be further reports coming forward? Thank you, Convener.
Catherine?
Yeah, certainly I can answer that. Appendix 4 of the report has the outlined approach for linking the reporting on delivery of the local housing strategy into the emerging place framework, which will have a council steering group as part of it. And the intention is that we will be reporting regularly into that council steering group on terms of delivery. We will also be reporting to the Health and Social Care Strategic Planning Group on actions that sit within the Housing Contribution Statement, as there is a number of actions within the LHS that cross over into matters that sit within the jurisdiction of the Health and Social Care Partnership. If the reporting arrangements under the place framework don't, however, give the links that we need with committee, and committee is not able to get the information on delivery that it feels it needs, I'm more than happy to bring a regular report back on delivery against the actions. And it could be that we could link that into the Strategic Housing Investment Plan report, which comes in November of each year. So if that is required, then we can certainly do that.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholl.
Hi, my question is about compulsory purchase orders. I was just wondering, has this been done before? And if so, how successful has it been?
Catherine?
In terms of compulsory purchase orders, it's not something that Angus Council has done before in relation to empty homes. There may be examples where it has been done for specific purposes, but not in relation to empty homes. There are examples, particularly in England, the use has been much more widespread, and it's something that we wish to investigate further.
Councillor Gall.
Thank you, Convener. It was on page 10, sustaining the private rented sector. Obviously, any town you go to, you can see hundreds, if not thousands, of flats, many from the Victorian era, that are in, a lot of them are in quite disrepair. As we're moving forward with energy costs and, a lot of them high ceilings, but also one of the biggest problems is the glass ceiling of a flat value is so low that we could get to the potential where it's not economically viable to renovate flats that are in such poor condition. My worry is the perfect storm, we end up seeing more and more become empty because of the various factors that are coming. And obviously the other problem is that there's hundreds of landlords, if not thousands. It's not a small group you're dealing with. How realistically do you think it's possible to bring that kind of communication to actually tackle that when there's so many variables and it's such a contentious subject for many different people?
Thanks, Councillor Gall. Catherine.
Yeah, Councillor Gull, I would share that concern, and there has been legislation brought forward by the Scottish Government in terms of energy performance standards for the private rented sector, and that those regulations were pushed back a couple of times because of the difficulties that landlords were facing over lockdown and the current issues with increasing rents. But there is going to become a tipping point in terms of private rented stock and when it is viable for it to be brought up to the standards that are required and when it's not. I think we're going to have to wait and see to some extent what landlords are willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And each property will have come with it its own set of circumstances. The focus for us is going to be on ensuring that landlords are aware of these standards that are coming forward and working with them to bring those properties into the right energy efficiency standards where it's possible to do so. And if not, thinking with them about what the viable exit strategies of those properties may be. And alongside thinking about empty homes and how we bring those back into use, I think we will have to look at what the council's role in that might be so that these properties don't lie empty in the long term.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, convener. Can I just say it's now recognised that stigma is one of the key contributing factors to drug deaths in Scotland. A lot of the drug deaths that we see here in Angus occur in houses. We've spoken in the past about trauma-informed practice. So I'd just like to see there's a lot in here about communities and our people and building vibrant communities that are, you know, caring and all looking after each other. So I would just like to see that there's maybe some recognition of that report, the strategy to address stigmatisation of people in communities affected by drug use.
You want to come in on that, Catherine? Anything to say?
Sorry, I lost my button there. Other than to say that that's absolutely an issue that we're focused on and we're working closely with the Health and Social Care Partnership and others in terms of looking at the needs of our community and obviously happy to take forward any recommendations that come from specific pieces of work as required.
Thanks, Catherine. Right, we move on to comments now. Councillor Speed has made a request to speak. Councillor Speed has 3 minutes to make her comments, questions, whatever way she wants to frame this one. So we'll start off on this one with Councillor Speed. And if anybody else wants to come in, please pop your hands up or indicate in the chamber. And just to reassure Councillor Fairweather, the reason I was separating between online and in the chamber is our screen that we normally use to see who's online, we don't have access to. So I'm having to look over to the computer on my left-hand side. So it just makes it a bit easier. So I'll just try and keep on top of that as we go. So first of all, Councillor Speed for 3 minutes.
Thanks, convener. There's no doubt that when housing needs are successfully met, that it helps reduce inequalities and helps enable better outcomes. Although the report and the local housing strategy highlights the current challenges, there are lots and lots and lots of words and phrases that are merely aspirations and a far cry from the reality of the challenges individuals and families are experiencing who have unmet housing needs. Our systems and processes aren't easy to navigate for many, and the introduction and rollout of choice-based letting and the allocation policy during the pandemic has played havoc with many of our applicants and caused tremendous confusion and additional pressure. For some, it has contributed to rapid decline in their mental health. Antisocial behaviour within our communities is another area of great concern that isn't being tackled timely enough, and there are examples of new tenants within new build properties whose dreams have been shattered and they are now seeking another further move in order to find refuge. Although I appreciate the complexities within our communities, to address the housing crisis, we should not lose sight of the fact that we simply need to better utilise our resources and increase our stock, as until then, people's wait times and the impact will only worsen. I'm extremely concerned that our capital build projects across Angus are experiencing significant delays, and the lack of progress to increase our accessible adapted accommodation and reduce wait times for those with a medical need continues to lengthen. Many individuals, children and families I know with a medical priority are not being able to live safely or have their most basic needs met, such as access to bathing and showering facilities to meet personal care needs. They are living in Angus in 2023 in third world conditions. The vision, both locally and nationally, is a far cry from the reality, and the quality impact assessment only describes the aspiration. The priorities that have been set out within the strategy lack detail, especially in terms of timescales for delivery. And in my view, this strategy paints a far brighter picture and raises, again, more questions than answers. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Speed. We move on to comments from the Chamber and online. Please indicate. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Convener. My comment is in relation to the Community Engagement Survey. I mean, overall, I welcome this report. I think it's a very good report. But on the Community Engagement Survey, I see that we have done remarkably better with 853 respondents compared to the 2017 to 22, which had 285. However, that said, the largest number of respondents, single number of respondents from owner-occupiers, which to me, while it's important, I think, to get a holistic picture of need in Angus, I would have liked to have seen a lot more response from the social rented sector. And just to say that hopefully officers will be able to bear down on this even more for the future. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Any other comments? Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. It was actually due to the question that was asked by Councillor Gall. I feel I should go back to earlier on in the statements of transparency. I am a private landlord in Angus, and therefore I felt it was best to now mention it at this point in time, and my apologies for not bringing this up in item number 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, Convener. I would just like to commend our officers and staff in the housing team for bringing together this really clear and as concise as it can be for a report that contains so much information. I think they've done a really good job on this. And of course, the next stage is delivery of it. And we'll all be working hard to make sure we can make a good job of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Gall.
Sorry, just to echo Councillor Boyd, I'm a private landlord as well.
Thank you, Councillor Gall. That's been noted. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. Just in general terms, I suppose, looking through this, but I'm looking in particular with a view on behalf of all the vulnerable people that we represent, be whatever age. I'm just going to pick on something that is a huge problem for us. When we mention fuel poverty, and I think we are trying our very best with this, can I just mention, especially to her, and Catherine, you're very welcome, it's good to meet you. Just really would like to mention that we're going to have to do, as an organisation and as a country, an awful lot more to help people who have prepaid meters, because that has a huge bearing on fuel poverty. And although we are speaking about that here, I'm delighted to see that. But really, can I just make that comment in general terms, please, and make that plea?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We move to the recommendations. Just bear with me. So yeah, we're looking to approve the content of the Local Housing Strategy 23-28 as detailed in Appendix 1, approve the ongoing development of the Local Housing Strategy, associated initiatives and work streams during the lifetime of the strategy, and the following committee approval that the LHS will be submitted to the Scottish Government for peer review prior to formal sign-off and publication. Are these recommendations approved? Right, thank you, everyone. We move on then to agenda item 5, market acquisition and disposal of properties. Alison, are you speaking to this one?
Yes, happy to introduce it. And again, Catherine will follow up with any specific questions. This report brings forward details of 2 programmes which we operate, which allow us to add properties to our portfolio and stock. We're looking to update the criteria of these schemes and also to increase the number of properties which we're able to purchase. The report provides details in terms of the background to that and why we would wish to do it, and includes the details of the grant eligibility.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Do we have any questions? Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you again, convener. Just going to the very first item on the agenda, the recommendation, can I ask, it might be Ms Johnson or Ms Smith, 50 properties per annum, we're asked to delegate authority. That's excellent. If we can increase, is that achievable, do you think? And also, will the local members, before they're purchased or when they're being purchased, will the local members be informed? Because I know in the past we've heard that there's properties being bought and it's been out with the council. Somebody else has mentioned to local members, and it might be, you know, the jungle drums certainly get the information out. So if the local members can be informed, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fotheringham. Catherine?
In terms of the number of purchases, we don't have any immediate plans to increase up to the limit of 50 because of existing resources, both staffing resources and financial resources. But what we're looking for is the flexibility to be able to shape these schemes so that we can respond to market circumstances and explore any opportunities that are available for us to be able to do so. So the 50 is an aspirational rather than a plan to deliver that at this time. In terms of letting members know about properties that we're purchasing, we can certainly find a way to do that, but you'll appreciate that timescales around the conveyancing process and purchasing means that it's probably unlikely that we would be able to do that. Purchases being purchased, but we can probably look at a way that we make members aware of ones that are coming in to our portfolio at an appropriate time so that you have that information.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, convener. Given the current house prices and the fact that on average Scottish Government only covers 31% of the total purchase cost of OMAs, what's the projected budget for the 50 properties you hope to purchase per annum?
Catherine?
As I say, the 50 is aspirational. We currently have a budget of around 1 million in the capital plan for purchasing of properties, and we would be looking to stick to that at this time. If we change to that budget, it will come through our capital monitoring report and through the budget setting report that comes before members, so there'll be an opportunity to see any changes to that. If we were looking to go up to 50 properties, we would have to be looking at very specific ways of funding that. For example, there has been an announcement by the Scottish Government just recently that there could be specific funding released for the purchase of empty homes for local authorities. So that's the kind of scheme that we would be looking towards if we were increasing the number of purchases that we were going to make.
Thank you, Catherine. Any more questions on that? We move on then to comments. Any comments from the chamber? Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, convener. I think that this is a really good proposal, actually, because by going up to 50, it does give that flexibility that allows us to react quickly when possibilities arise and propositions arise, and I would highly recommend it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. And again, Councillor Speed for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Thanks, convener. I fully support and agree that we need to have a range of initiatives which can respond flexibly to a complex mix of challenges. However, I did find it concerning that there is no kind of clearly identified funding as of yet, and I'm unsure as to how, you know, the number 50 has come about. How has this been reached, especially when there has only been 68 properties purchased over a 7 to 8 period. So that's less than less than 50% of the current figure that you've been working with over the yearly period. And within that, only 10 in total able to meet medical need. Over the last 5 years, this council has been unable to analyse current stock type and provided breakdown of the different types of accessible properties and those with varying levels of adaptations that have previously been carried out, or be able to analyse that information and data alongside what appears to be unknown turnover data. So I just am really struggling to understand where the 50 has come from. The current market today in Angus has very few properties under, £100,000. So obviously, when you look at the grant funding that is available, it does leave concerns around, where the additional funding would come from. And I guess I'd like to know how many properties the council would be aiming to purchase that are barrier free or have the potential to be adapted, because again, cost for adaptation would remain unknown. So I guess, yeah, again, I just feel that where does the 50 come from is my biggest query. But can't take away from the fact that I fully support doing all we can to maximise and increase our stock.
Catherine, do you want to address anything, comments there?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the 50 number, as I say, that is an aspirational number to allow us to test out some different models, and particularly thinking about how we might contribute to reducing the number of empty homes that are in the private sector, looking at some of the opportunities that are coming through from additional funding streams, as an example of that. So the number 50 is an aspirational number and wouldn't necessarily be made up of just properties that are on the open market as we're doing at the moment, but it could be properties that are empty and not otherwise being used. The ability to bring properties into use for medical use, we would be using the same target as we have for our new build programme, which is we want 20% of all the new supply that we bring in to be for particular needs, and half of that, so 10% overall, to be wheelchair standard. We don't set a specific number for any one project or any one mechanism of bringing housing in. So that is a global target for the whole programme. So we would be looking to achieve that alongside with the properties being brought back into use forming part of that. And the grant award, it goes up incrementally depending on the purchase price, and the Scottish Government grant recognises that where there is additional investment required to make a property suitable for somebody with a medical need, we can include those costs in the overall cost of bringing the property back into use for our needs, and therefore that's taken into account by them in the grant award.
Thank you, Catherine. Any further comments then on this one? Okay, so that's agenda item 5, the recommendations 1 to 4. Are we happy to recommend and agree the recommendations? Okay, thanks. We move on to agenda item 6, Cycling, Walking and Safer Routes Fund Programme of Works. Graham, are you introducing this one?
This report updates the committee on the delivery of the programme of projects funded in 2022-23 through the Cycling, Walking and Safer Routes Fund, and seeks approval of the programme of projects to be funded during 23-24. As detailed in the report, this year we are receiving £742,000 of funding from Transport Scotland, and as detailed in the report in Appendix 1, there is a breakdown of the status of previous year's funded projects, and in Appendix 2, our proposal after the assessment and after the public consultation has been carried out in terms of the projects that we are proposing for implementation during 22-23.
Thank you.
Sorry, 23-24, convener. I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Graham. Do we have any questions on this one? Councillor Dunno.
Thanks, convener. On page 81, we'll have the Angus disused railway lines, the feasibility study looking at the disused railway lines across Angus. Can I ask you, Graham, is Freecom Arbroath likely to be in that consultation? Because obviously it's been about 3 years since we did the Freecom Arbroath consultation with the residents of Freecom.
Graham. Craig?
Yeah, simple answer, Councillor Dunno, will be included.
Hi, Graham. Could you repeat that? I think we didn't catch that in the chamber.
Apologies, it was just in response to Councillor Dunno, it will be included in that report.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
That's great news. Thanks, Craig.
Councillor Fairweather.
Thanks, convener. To Councillor Durno, I'd be looking for Elliot to Arburlet. Is that to be included?
Craig?
That's another one, Councillor Fairweather. Yeah, that's also included in, and it will be included in that study.
Super, thank you.
Councillor Scott?
Thank you, convener. I'm delighted to see Dramatically Loan accessibility improvements included in here. Campaigned for a long time, and I've met Craig Hudson on site when I was chair of the Community Council. So yeah, delighted to see that coming forward. Could you tell me any update on where we are with consultation with the public, please?
Yeah, there's ongoing consultation as part of the detailed design. That has been held, and there's still more to come. We're almost at the end of the design stage, and when it's out to tender, there will be further consultation before any works start on site.
Are you want to come in at all, Graham? Or you okay? Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things, really. I mentioned the hillside to Craigo, which I initiated really when I was approached by a constituent who was keen to see a cycleway between the two villages. And I see that the feasibility study cost us £18,000, and I would have said that was very good value for money, because I got a draft copy of the feasibility study and it was extremely comprehensive with a huge amount of interesting information in it. However, when you looked at the final cost of the proposed route, at somewhere between £1.5 and £2 million for a 4-mile route, it's slightly jaw-dropping sum of money. And it would appear that the route was looking at tarring the various routes, which seemed to me perhaps unnecessary for a cycleway, and obviously there would be cost in that. So, and given that our budget is £740,000 a year for this, you look at some other ones, the Brechin to Montrose is at between 5 and 9.5 million, and disused railway lines 45 million. That there's clearly some of these are just never going to be affordable with the best will in the world. And the feasibility study I saw was very comprehensive. I would have to say we had an online session on the Montrose to Brechin one, which didn't inspire a lot of confidence, I think, amongst elected members who were on that call. But the level of detail on the one I saw was extremely good. But it's come up with a number that, for me, even as a local member, I couldn't possibly defend spending that amount of money for the number of people who would use it. So there seems to be a bit of a reality check. What can we afford? What standard of road or pathway or cycleway we can produce it? It kind of, we've almost like we're behaving almost like we've got a bottomless pit of money. So that was really just a comment. I mean, I'm obviously pleased that we've done it. I asked for it, but having seen the number, it looks like it's unfortunately unaffordable.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Any further comments? Councillor B.
Yeah, as far as the Montrose to Brecon active travel route, I disagree. We had thousands, sorry, not thousands, we had loads of people that were absolutely behind us. And if it's something that we could do, we absolutely should.
Thank you, Councillor Beattie. Any other comments? Councillor Brace.
Yes, whilst some of these projects are big projects, they are expensive projects, we've also got some much more modest ones, such as number 19 in the table, which is from Montrose High Street and train station active travel improvements at £25,000. And there are big projects that can cost an awful lot of money and make a huge difference to an awful lot of people. There are also projects that are much more modest in cost but can make a big difference too. So it's good to see that one for Montrose in there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you very much, Convener. Just like my colleagues have said, there are a lot of very, very good projects here. And as Councillor Brace says, some modest cost ones. My constituents will certainly be delighted to see the Milton Place to the Green Circular, the incline free access between Ferry Road. So thank you very much, and it's a welcome report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. Okay, we'll move to the recommendations then. It's recommended that the committee agrees 1, 2 and 3. Do we agree those recommendations? Okay, then we move on to item 7, the experimental traffic regulation order for school friendly zones phase 3. Do we have any, sorry, Graham, are you introducing this one?
Yes, Convener. This report relates to the making of an traffic regulation order in respect of school-friendly zones at Muirfield Primary School, Arbroath, Mason Dew Primary School, Brecon, Seaview Primary School, Moneyfeith, and finally Newtile Primary School. As detailed in the report, this follows the successful implementation at 3 schools already, and also there are 5 trial school-friendly zones at 5 other schools that are ongoing. As you heard at the beginning of the meeting, several members have been involved in the stakeholder groups that were set up to support the proposals as well.
Thank you, Graham. We move on then to questions. Anybody got any questions about this? Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, I was in the stakeholder meeting for the Muirfield School, and I welcome this. It looks like a positive move. As active travel spokesperson, I'm absolutely behind minimising the use of cars and other vehicles wherever possible. I would just ask, can you take into account the roads that inevitably get knocked onto by the actual exclusion zones in the information that goes out in all these zones, just to make sure as many people as possible are aware that there might be a little bit of a knock-on effect on their streets? We've seen that in every school zone, really, a little bit. So if you could take that into account.
Graham?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Cowdery. Of course, we have the experience now having, this is the 3rd phase of doing so. So you're quite right to point that out, and it's something that we'll take cognizance of when we're implementing on this occasion too.
Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just wondered if officers have got any further measures that we can look at for implementing. You know, there's a big issue with traffic still driving through these. I've spoken with officers on this, and also I've been provided with video footage which I have passed on to officers. And we do seem to have an issue with people abusing this for the short period of time that it is in place every day. Police Scotland, I understand, say they'll give it passing attention and whatever when available, but you know it is a bit of a job in its present form. I just wondered anything further that they can do with this.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Graham?
I do acknowledge Councillor Stewart's point that there are what I would say exceptions in terms of car users not complying with the school-friendly zone. I would say, though, that feedback, it is exceptions, and on the whole, as I said at the beginning, it has been successful, and the majority, nearly all, respect the school-friendly zones, and I think that we need to acknowledge that. However, as I said, Councillor Stewart is correct that there are occasions where it isn't people aren't following the compliance to the school-friendly zone. It has been raised the nation cross-agency group that Police Scotland also attend. My colleague Craig Hudson has already responded that he will ensure that that's raised again in terms of what other joint working between our own warden service, the Police Scotland, in terms of enforcement, in terms of presence on the ground. So yes, we appreciate that it's not completely adhered to by all, but as I said, it has been successful, and the majority, nearly all, do comply, which we're very pleased about.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I guess I'll frame this as a question, and I'm looking really at point 3.6 in the report, which indicates that not all routes are suitable for school exclusion zones. Because I know I've been approached by parents at other schools that haven't yet got a school exclusion zone saying, "Oh, when is it coming to XYZ school?" And I thought of the routes, and I thought that's going to be very difficult. And I think we're clearly saying that if it's a main route through a town or an emergency route or something like that, or a bus route, it's not appropriate because you'd have to displace traffic off that route somewhere else. And in many cases, there isn't an alternative. So I think we just need to be, I would hope we're going to manage expectations as to what we can do, and that we aren't going to be able to do all primary schools or all secondary schools, because the ones that have been done at Montrose, one was a very straightforward one. It was a cul-de-sac. The second one, I hear what Councillor Stewart's saying, but I thought it had been relatively successful. But there are some clearly that I think would fit into the sort of routes that are described in 3.6 that we aren't going to be able to do all. I think we just need to manage that expectation there.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. Graham.
I would just say that's an accurate summary, is that yes, we're endeavouring to do where it is feasible, but it's correct to say that it won't be possible to do at every location, really, for the reasons that Councillor Duff just outlined, and it's quite correct in terms of managing expectations that is highlighted.
Thanks, Graham. Any further questions? Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, convener. This is, of course, experimental traffic regulation orders for school-friendly zones. And we do have a bit of experience, and I think so far it's worked really quite well on the whole. So my question is, what happens when it doesn't work? Because it is experimental, this isn't a sort of final thing and there's no changing it. So if we go ahead with these and we find that it's not working as well as it might, or we think there's other things that would work better, how would you go about doing that? Or even if it's just not going to work, we can rescind it, scrap it. Is that right?
Yes, as I said, all the zones we've put in place so far have worked effectively. However, I think it's fair to say there has been issues. Some have been more plain sailing and have passed without really any issue. Again, my colleague Craig Hudson, who's been more involved operationally, could give examples, but there are examples where we've had to make some adjustments. In some cases, that's actually been when we've had the stakeholder group meeting, and we've had to amend our proposals as a result of that. So I would pay credit to the team who have made adjustments and put in changes in terms of whether that's, for example, the location of signage. So I think there has been issue, but on the whole we've been able to resolve all of them. Ultimately, this is an experimental traffic regulation order that's applicable for 18 months, and at the end of that, if it is deemed through, again, the stakeholder group unsuccessful, then our recommendation that we would bring back to committee would be that we withdraw the school-friendly zone.
Thanks for that, Graham.
Thanks, Graham. Any other questions? We'll move on to comments. Any comments? Okay, Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you again, Convener. Yes, just to follow on what Mr Daly said, the school-friendly zone trial at Liff Primary, I believe, is working exceptionally well. I had, as did my colleague, I think, Councillor Whiteside, a lot of concerns from parents at Liff before this was put in. So I'm delighted to say that I think it's working well. I haven't had any further concerns from parents of Liff. And I'm also pleased to see, Mr Daly, the experimental traffic regulation order going in for Seaview and Moneyfield, because I do get regularly, as Mr Hudson will know, comments and concerns about the parking at Seaview. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I took part in the stakeholder meeting, and I'm really concerned, remind you, because these other streets are very busy. I've raised my concerns, as has Councillor Beattie. I know that it has been a bit of a problem at Andover School as well, and whilst we would want to encourage everybody to walk to school, there are some parents that are rushing off to get to work and do drop their kids on the way, kind of thing. So yeah, it's just to be aware that we do have real concerns about the knock-on effect, because these streets are already very busy but can't be part of an exclusion zone. Thank you.
Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, just to echo what my colleague said there, our concerns really was for the displacement of traffic out of St Andrew Street into Argyle Street and Market Street, which is already very busy and has a nursery in it. So if anyone has concerns, they should raise it with us.
Thanks, Councillor Beattie. Councillor Durno.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. It was just to let the committee know that with all the new planning applications that come through for school, and especially the new Moneyfield school, that in the planning department we're actually making sure that there's more drop-off areas for children to be dropped nearer schools, because obviously there is a lot of elderly grandparents that are looking after children now and may have mobility issues but don't actually have blue badges. So we're looking at that for the future, for all new schools to have a drop-off area that's available to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Durno. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Convener. I must say that I do welcome this, especially for Muirfield School. Over the years at School Road, it has been a mitigated nightmare, and the amount of complaints from the residents was, to be quite honest, unbelievable. The police time and officer time taken up with that particular road. I'm not going to say that I certainly hope it I hope it works. I'll not hold my breath, but fingers crossed that it does. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. Any other comments? And I think the one thing I would say on the school-friendly zones is I've been really surprised at how effective they've been and how little upheaval or trouble there's been for the concerns. I had exactly the same thoughts about Maze and Dew when I saw it, and I raised that earlier in the convener's briefing. But we'll see how it goes, experimental, and hopefully they work out. So we move to the recommendations. Do we agree recommendations 1 to 4? Right, thanks everyone. Okay, we now move on then to agenda item 8, parking enforcement increase in tariff level of penalty charge notice. This is where we have a deputation where we ask Mr. Arthur Grant to come up to the desk there and just grabs a seat and just press the button on the mic. You've 10 minutes maximum to make your deputation for us, and then questions from members, if they so wish, will follow. Okay, thanks, Mr. Grant. Your 10 minutes starts just when you're ready.
Okay, thank you for hearing me, and I will try not to take the full 10 minutes. I'm not looking to make representations on the principle of parking charges. I try to park responsibly. The amount of a parking fine is academic for me because I don't park where I shouldn't. But there's an important point of detail that causes problems for people like me who live in the centre of a town, particularly in the centre of Arbroath. And I find it actually encourages behaviours that the enforcement policy was intended to prevent. So it kind of works against itself. And what I'm talking about is the 72-hour limit on long stay car parks, long stay council car parks. It makes sense because it prevents cars being abandoned there, it prevents cars being put there for sale and all this other stuff. But in the case of town centre residents, the law of unintended consequences comes into play, and it has an effect that it's not meant to have. Where I live, in the centre of Arbroath, there's basically no on-street parking. There are huge shoppers' car parks and business car parks, which people travelling into the town centre can use, but I can't, because they're very time restricted or they're customers only or whatever. The only responsible place that I can park near where I live is in a council long stay car park. I can't park anywhere else. And yet I can be penalised for doing that. It seems to me the purpose of parking enforcement, particularly in Arbroath, which is where I live, there's two aspects to it. There's the one that was stated in the business plan, which was to combat antisocial parking, which a few years ago was becoming a real problem in Arbroath. And the second one that isn't stated in the policy, but probably comes under a bigger picture, is to create an incentive to use means other than car to come into town. And that works as it's intended to work for people who are travelling into the town centre for work or for shopping or anything like that. But for people who live in the town centre, it actually has exactly the opposite effect. It incentivises behaviours that should be discouraged. If you live in the centre of Arbroath in particular, which is what I know about, to avoid a fine, you've got two choices. Either you move your car every 72 hours. Now, some people use their car every day. I don't. I own a car. The car doesn't own me. I use other means if I can. I've seen me take the car on journeys where I wanted to walk or take the bus, simply to restart that 72-hour parking clock. Now, I'm not sure how strictly the 72 hours is enforced, but I've got no case if somebody wants to fine me because it's in big letters on the signs. So it's a concern. When I was ill with COVID and had to self-isolate for 10 days, I'm thinking my car is in that car park for 10 days and I'm only allowed 3. Alternatively, if you don't want to have to move your car every second or third day, what you do is you avoid purpose-built car parks altogether and you drive around looking for unregulated spaces on corners or in narrow streets where a considerate motorist would not choose to park if they could avoid it. So for people who don't live in the town centre, the 72-hour rule, for one thing, is sensible, and secondly, it's largely academic because they're going home at night, or maybe if they're out for a drink, they're going home the next day, but they're not parking in the same place for 72 hours anyway. But for town centre residents, it's actually a constraint that can cause real inconvenience, and it actually promotes the behaviours that it's intended to discourage. It makes you use your car more instead of less, and it encourages you to park with less consideration for your neighbours, not more. I feel, to put it bluntly, if I can, the council's parking policy just has a blind spot about people who live in the town centre. It's a policy that seems to be written on the basis that parking is for commuters, and it seems to forget the needs of the people who actually live in centres. So my hope is that before you pass these increased fines, which I don't object to in principle, but before you pass these increased fines, my hope is that you might take some time to consider some kind of mechanism whereby these increased fines don't apply to people who've done nothing more than park responsibly and with consideration near where they live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Grant after his deputation there? Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation, Mr. Grant. And I'd have to say I've had constituents who've given me a similar tale. I guess my question to you is, you're making a pretty persuasive case for having a permit system for town centre car parks, which of course we did have before, and these were removed. But that would be a potential solution to your problem. I'm not saying we could do it, but I'm just, would you pay for the privilege of not having to move your car every 72 hours?
I never, even when there was a permit system, I never had that option. The last time I raised that was precisely when parking charges were introduced. Now, this is a public meeting and I don't want to become very unpopular, but actually 120 quid a year to be sure of a parking space in my own area was value for money for me. I didn't mind that at all. Other people did, like businesses and so on, but it helped me. But the 72-hour rule still applied even then. And I did actually contact council staff at that point, making the same point. And they said, well, yeah, that's not really what the rule is intended for. I suspect you would have to leave it 2 or 3 weeks before they did anything, to be honest. But they don't say that. The sign says 72 hours, right? But what they said was, well, if you give us a call before you go away, like if you're going off on holiday and you're not taking your car to the airport or something like that, give us a call, let us know, and we'll make sure you don't get fined. But when you think about it, that's, phone up to ask the council for permission to not drive your car. It doesn't work. So yeah, I was particularly peeved at that point because I was paying for 365 days parking a year, but could be fined if I parked for 4. So that because you were still limited, the time limits, even when people had permits, the time limits in car parks still applied, including to the long-term car parks. And as I say, I can see why it can't be totally without limit. But I think either limit, so that if a car is there that long, you really know it's been abandoned, or alternatively find some kind of solution, whether it's a permit system or whatever, that allows people who live in a particular defined area to park for more than 72 hours near their homes. In terms of payment, I think you have to be careful, because while it would be a convenience that I personally would pay for, I think the optics politically of charging local people to park where other people don't have to pay would be another matter, So a scheme where local residents can buy a permit and other people are still parking for free, you would have to be careful with. I think, it's, there are professional people here who are expert in this kind of thing. I wouldn't presume to tell them their job, but I think it shouldn't be that hard to find an arrangement whereby either the 72-hour period is significantly extended, or alternatively that it doesn't apply to people who are within a certain distance of their home.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Any further questions? No, and online. Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Grant. We move on then to the parking enforcement increase in tariff penalty charge notice. Agenda item number 8. Can I ask if anyone has any questions on this one? Councillor Fairweather.
Convener, not so much a question, but a request. Can I just say that I have no issues at all regarding this report, apart from the fact I don't think it goes quite far enough. So through you, Chair, what I'd like to ask is, can I ask for an addition to the recommendations? That being to review procedures of parking control notices, PCNs. And that should include recovery of unpaid notices. And I also ask, Convener, that you can agree a member officer group to take this forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fairweather. Just bear with me a sec.
Perhaps Mr. Daly would like to comment.
Graham, do you want to comment on that one first?
Yes, Convener, I think if I understand correctly, is that Councillor Fairweather is saying that given the timing of the increase in the proposed increase in parking control notice, whether a member officer working group to review our current processes for how we administrate the notices, including recovery of unpaid. I would say that's something that we could support and we could arrange. I do not think it would be a significant undertaking or time demand for us to do that, and from an officer's perspective, it is something that we could undertake.
Thanks, Graham. When I first took the chair of this committee, I'd said that my door was open, you could come and speak to me about these sort of things, and I have no problem at all with what Councillor Fairweather's asked for with regards to the member officer working group with and getting it set up as part of this. And if Graham can action that, that's perfectly fine for us to do here. The additional recommendation has to be agreed by the committee as a whole, so we can go through the debate as normal and then come to the additional recommendation as we go through the recommendation. So that's how I would suggest we proceed. So if we open it up to questions on the paper at the moment, and then we'll figure ourselves out once we get to the end. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. And I suppose my question just comes on just what my colleague, Councillor Fairweather, has said and what my other colleague, Graham, has agreed to put into train. And just for what you've been saying yourself, sir, earlier, taking it all into consideration, considering we're going to have a member officer working group looking at things, my brain thinks that I'm needing to find out a wee bit more insofar as how many people are already afflicted by this, if you like, in your area. And given that also we are, I sit on a planning group, and we are almost looking to invite people to come in and stay in town centres, using up all buildings, etc. There's something alluded to that earlier. That it might be good to be able to on that, if I'm explaining myself correctly.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. I think we'll probably need to get back to you on that one. But do you have a general comment or in relation to Councillor Clark's question?
I would say that in the report it does refer to the number of PCNs that were issued for the 12-month period for 22-23, which was 3,913. Again, I would say if you have a request for further detail, I think I would be happy to provide that if you were to get in touch.
Thank you, Graham. It's really in relation as well as to how many people, not so much the miscreants who are not paying their fines, but how many people, just in this town, for instance, I'm a local councillor here, and there's a lot of people have said just the kind of thing you're speaking about, insofar as how this would actually affect them. And if we're going to have more and more people staying in town centres, it's just how many people are going to be affected, really. It's not an exact science. It's just, we would need to get an idea of that.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Councillor Meekin.
I'm reading the report. I was interested that there's a statement here that the current rate's insufficient, and there's also a mention that, for example, 3913 PCNs were issued in 2002, 2003, but it gives no comparison with any other year. So looking at this, I don't know whether it's got worse, got better, and if we're being asked to increase it with the statement that it's not working, then it'd be nice to have a comparison to see on previous years whether it is or isn't.
Thanks, Councillor Meekin. Graham?
I don't have that data available. Obviously, it would be affected by the impact of COVID, of course, in terms of the trend data. I think what I would say is that the recommendations based on that, almost 4,000 PCNs clearly shows that there are still issues in terms of irresponsible parking. And as referred to in the report, is that the rate has been the same since 1992. And I think our balanced view is that increasing it from the proposed £60 to £100 with the adjustments depending on if you pay in time, is that our recommendation is that it is an effective deterrent. It's something, again, in the report that other local authorities, through our discussions, are following a similar route. So although we don't have the trend data presented, I would say that, you know, almost 4,000 shows that there is justification in terms of taking action.
Thank you, Graham. Now, I allowed Councillor Clark a supplementary, and Councillor Meakin's looking for one. So, yeah, I've got to be consistent. Right, Councillor Meakin.
It's in relation to the EIA. I wonder whether any considerations been taken when looking at the increase in fines of the people who will actually be fined, if you like, i.e. whether they be people on low incomes, older people with a fixed income. Is anything, because there's nothing in the EIA about it.
No, Councillor Meakin, that there wasn't the data available. We had, again, certainly I take on board your point, and maybe whether I would need to check if that's even feasible, whether we could gather that data, because bear in mind, it's not information we seek from someone when we issue a PCN. So I think it would be challenging to say, in terms of you know, personal information, that would allow us to be informed in terms of the persons who are receiving PCN. I understand your point, but the data just simply wasn't available.
Thanks, Graham. Supplementary, knock yourself out.
I'll maybe just do two in one go, will I? Yeah, I'd like to thank Mr Grant for raising the car park issue. My husband actually fell foul whilst paying the permit, the 72-hour rule. He didn't make that mistake again, I have to say. But on the flip side, there is a problem, Mr Daly, and I would hope you would recognise that. It's the opposite from you, Mr Grant, where Montrose Street and Clerk Street, where maybe not so much Clerk Street, but Montrose Street, there is no council car parks down that end of the town. They're all up the top end of the town, and then the restrictions for 1 hour parking. So I get a lot of constituents contacting me that are coming off a night shift or, you know, working up in Aberdeen. They're having to move their car every hour. That is a really, really busy place. You know, I've witnessed cars parking up on the grass and round the back. All the side streets are full. All the, you know, all the sort of housing areas are full. So what can we do to resolve this? Because I feel that we'll be punishing, again, our own residents rather than people. I think also comparing us to Dundee and maybe Glasgow and Edinburgh, we're very rural. Cars are needed. I wouldn't be able to do my job on public transport. My husband certainly couldn't by the time he got there, it'd be time to come back. So do you recognise that this is a problem?
Thanks, Councillor Scott.
Thank you.
I recommend, in terms of the question, I recognise both. I think it's similar to the points Mr Grant presented as well. I think it's something I would say we need to take cognizance again of in terms of future considerations, in terms of residents and you know, the permit issue. So I think it's I'm unable to give, you know, a definite, you know, steer in terms of action we take, other than to say that we take stock of what the points have been said today, and in terms of our deliberations, in terms of future development of our policies with regard our long-term car parks and residence parking, I think it was very helpful, I would say, to have that feedback today.
Thanks, Graham. Any other questions before we move on to comments? Okay, we open the floor up to comments now. Anyone got any comments? Nope. Oh, Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, convener. To the meat of the thing here before us, the proposal to put PCNs up from £60 to £100. I would have thought that, you know, if it's 31 years since we last had an increase, I would have thought that this is a very reasonable approach to take. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. And Councillor Scott.
Thank you, convener. I've heard what Councillor Brace has just said, but in the report before, we're paying heed to the cost of living crisis and the, you know, the utilities. So yes, I realise that it's been a long time since there has been an increase, but I'm concerned. I've been a traffic warden in London, and I absolutely, I really get upset at bad parking on double yellow lines. I think you'll probably find this hard to believe, but in the past I would have sprinted to issue that ticket. Probably couldn't sprint anymore, but yeah, I agree that there is a problem, and I think these are the people that should be targeted. But day after day, my garage is in the bottom of a car park, and also a park in Leonard Street in Arbroath all week for my work. I actually advise people, and it tends to be more elderly people, elderly residents, just nipping to the butcher or whatever. And I'll say to them, oh, you're going to be long because half your tire's on the white line and you'll get a ticket. And they're not aware. And I feel, and I'm really worried that these are the people that will be punishing rather than, the persistent offenders that are parking on double yellows. So therefore, I can't support that increase. I'm sorry. And I also don't think we can be compared again to cities, because we're a rural location. Thanks.
Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you. Albeit I'm listening to what Councillor Scott says. At the end of the day, if you park illegally, you can expect a fine. I would certainly hope that what Councillor Scott said, that our wardens would look sensibly if somebody has just parked just slightly outside or on a white line. And I would certainly hope that would be the case. But I do believe it would be beneficial to this council to give notice to people who don't pay their fines. They look at the recommendation I've put forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Fairweather. And we'll come back to you in a second just to go over the additional recommendation. If you just bear with us, Councillor Meakin's asked to make a comment.
Thank you, Convener. Like Councillor Scott, and for similar reasons, and also for the fact that I have no comparison on other years and why it's required, I also can't support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Meakin. And what I would say is, whilst I support the principle that we're bringing forward here today, every comment from the deputation to Councillor Scott, I think we should take full account of and look into what options we've got to address those concerns going forward as a communities committee. And again, in the spirit of what we talked about at the start, working as a communities committee to get things done. Councillor Fairweather, are you able to read out your additional recommendation again, just so the committee is fully aware of it and it's fresh in the memory? Yeah,
certainly, Convener. I've tried to make it it's fairly straightforward, and I think the last part is the main part of it, regarding recovery. But the extra recommendation would be to review procedures and process of parking control notices, PCNs, and that should include recovery of unpaid notices.
Thank you, Councillor Fairweather. So that's an additional recommendation to be recommendation 4. Recommendation 3, because I'm on the wrong page. Ahead of myself. To be recommendation 3. So I'd just like to ask the committee if they're happy with the additional recommendation and to pass the 3 recommendations as laid out, both on paper and verbally from Councillor Fairweather. Councillor Scott.
Hiya, thanks, Convener. Can I just have some clarity? I'm a little bit confused because I had sent some questions to Mr. Daly, which he answered yesterday. So I understand it as if you don't pay your ticket and it then goes to the sheriff officers. I know this because my friend's son has actually had the sheriff officers at his door, and a £30 ticket has now gone up to £290. So what processes are we reviewing? Because the process seems quite clear to me. So just a bit of clarity from maybe Councillor Fairweather on what he's wanting the process.
Processing right and right procedures are fairly straightforward. Albeit we right test sheriff officers can be sent. There are quite a number of people who don't pay, and I just want to look at the procedures to make sure they do pay.
Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I hear what Councillor Fairweather is saying, but I mean, the council uses debt recovery procedures for all sorts of things. You know, people don't pay their council tax or they don't pay something else. The council ultimately will go into debt recovery. So is that what Councillor Fairweather is really asking about, the council's debt recovery process, or is he specifically talking about debt recovery only about parking? Because it would seem like one's a sort of universal potential issue, and then we've got a subset of that, which is parking. And I would have thought our parking yield, if you like, is actually quite good at £85,000 a year. Clearly, that's not profit, because that costs us money to collect that, and I suspect you know, that's a factor. But we're collecting debts for lots of things, and I mean, I'm sure Finance Department could give us some data on that. I mean, I would have thought we generally had a report that our debt recovery is quite good, but I'm not sure whether our finance colleague might want to give us some information on that, because to me it's a general problem. It's not specifically about parking.
Graham, do you want to come in on any of the comments that we've had so far on this point? And then I'd look to try and get a solution to this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, my initial understanding was that it was to review our whole procedures in terms of just the administration, and that could range from how we hear appeals, and it was just the collective in terms of administration. I would say that it is correct in terms of the procedure, as Councillor Scott said. I think she described it, and I'd also say Councillor Duff is also correct that my understanding it's the same as we follow for any debt recovery procedure within the council. So I would say those points are correct, and hence the reason why my understanding would be that if we were to review a settlement member officer and working group, it wouldn't be purely for the reason of debt recovery, but in terms of how we administrate the parking control and control notices as a whole. That was my understanding at the beginning.
Councillor Brace.
Yes, thanks, Convener. We have two recommendations before us, and obviously there are at least two councillors who aren't present, who aren't supportive of the increase in the charge rate. I would have thought it appropriate to deal with those two first by vote, if one of the people unhappy with the motion wants to bring forward an amendment, and then after that we can consider Councillor Fairweather's proposed third recommendation.
I don't think, Councillor Brace, that would help. I think what we would need to do is move forward with the motion that I would be putting forward, which is recommendations 1, 2, and Councillor Fairweather's third motion, which I'm happy to support. They would then require someone to bring forward an amendment if they didn't agree with that, and then subsequently maybe another amendment to notice of another amendment. That would be the way, I think, to bring it forward. I'll take one last comment from Councillor Stewart, and then I think we'll get down to voting. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Prior to this meeting, I had a few discussions with officers regarding this subject. I'm not going to go into detail during the meeting of the content of that, but that is why Councillor Fairweather has raised this, and I would certainly support the reasoning behind that, and hope that we can get an agreement. We can have a member officers group to look at this. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Stewart. Right, we'll move on to then the recommendations. So I move that the recommendations for the committee to consider a recommendation 1, 2 and the third recommendation as detailed by Councillor Fairweather in the chamber there just now. Councillor Brace. Do we have any amendment? Councillor Meakin. So, did you want to come in?
Sure. I think, Councillor Meakin, just in terms of your amendment, what I would suggest is that perhaps you want to note the contents of the report, but not to the increase.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Kate and Councillor Scott seconded that. Anything further? We move to the vote then. So it's vote motion or amendment.
Yep, convener, I'll just outline that. So the motion by yourself, seconded by Councillor Brace, is to approve the recommendations in the report with the addition of the third recommendation outlined by Councillor Fairweather. The amendment by Councillor Meakin, seconded by Councillor Scott, is to note the contents of the report but not to increase the rate for the PCNs. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener.
Motion.
Councillor Brace.
Motion.
Councillor Boyd.
Motion.
Councillor Clark. Motion. Councillor Cowdy. Motion. Councillor Durno.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Fotheringham.
Motion.
Sorry, Councillor Fairweather.
Motion.
And Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor McLaren.
Motion.
Amendment.
Councillor Beattie.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Gall.
Motion.
Councillor Scott.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
The motion's carried by 12 votes to 4.
Okay, thanks everyone. So we move on then. Sorry, Councillor Scott.
Could I just record my dissent, please?
George, Councillor Meakin.
Yes, if I could record mine. Thank you.
Okay, then we move on to agenda item 9. We get there. This is, what page am I? So yeah, agenda item 9. We're looking at the approach to climate change, net zero biodiversity one-off investment fund. Alison or Jill? Jill, are you coming in? Alison.
I'm going to introduce this one.
So thank you, Chair. This report sets out the proposed approach and criteria for the allocation of the one-off funds to support work and investments in climate change, net zero and biodiversity projects and initiatives. The fund of 1 million was agreed at the special budget meeting of the 2nd of March, and subsequent to this, it was agreed that 250,000 be directed towards the Monifieth Learning Campus to ensure that the passive house provisions were retained given the reduced energy consumption and the environmental benefits of these to the project and climate change reduction targets. This leaves the remaining funding of 750,000. Given the twin and Given the twin climate and nature crisis and statutory duties of the Council in both areas, officers propose that the funding be split 65% towards climate change and net zero and the remaining 35% towards biodiversity projects, although it should be noted how interrelated these elements and the projects that sit underneath them are. Both areas are subject to scrutiny through our statutory duty reports, and therefore the main assessment criteria focuses on the strategic impact of projects and the delivery of existing actions set out in our plans. Applications will be invited through the existing working groups, and following assessment, a further report to committee following the summer recess will provide details of all projects and recommended those for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. We open it up then to questions. Councillor Cowdery.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really welcome this report. Angus Council declared a climate emergency in September 2019. That's almost 3.5 years ago, and we need to put words into action. So really, really happy to see this coming forwards. I'm a huge advocate specifically for biodiversity, both because we're facing, as Ms Patterson mentioned, a massive biodiversity crisis in Scotland and the rest of the UK, and also because biodiversity projects particularly help engage the community, and we know that when you engage people with nature, you protect it. So I wonder, Ms Patterson, if you could go into just a little bit more detail about the Council's commitments and duties, specifically regarding biodiversity. I know we have the Tayside Local Biodiversity Action Plan, and I just wondered how we are going to move forward regarding that. Thank you.
Jill.
Thank you, Councillor Cowdery. Yes, we currently have the Tayside Local Biodiversity Action Plan, and there are a significant number of actions that have been progressed in relation to that. And we have a report scheduled to come to committee later this year to update on the progress with the action plan and also to provide the forward look of that moving forward. Nationally, we've just had the final draft of the Scottish Biodiversity Strategy published, and officers have responded to that. And that's very much set the context for the nature crisis and the work moving forward. Later in the year, to accompany the Local Biodiversity Action Plan update report, we will also have our statutory duty report on biodiversity, which the Council is scrutinised on in terms of our targets. We have a duty to ensure that we conserve and protect nature, and that report sets out the detail of that. So if there's any specific questions on projects, my colleague Kellyanne Dempsey leads on the biodiversity work with her team, if there's anything specific you wanted to ask about the action plans.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Any comments? No. So we move to the recommendations. You'll see the recommendations here. 1, 2 and 3. Do we agree the recommendations? Thanks, everyone.
Agree.
So we move on now to the possible exclusion of the public and press. The committee is asked to consider, in terms of Standing Order 28.2, whether the public and press should be excluded during consideration of the following items, so as to avoid the disclosure of information which is exempt in Part 1 of Schedule 7A to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Do we agree? Right, thanks. Please stop the YouTube.